Welcome guys, I'm Gio here, and this is another video in a series about functional programming in JavaScript. And we are about to explore reduce function. This is a very useful list operation. You might be familiar with it, or maybe you are not, or maybe you are not even aware that this function exists. And once we explain this, and once you get familiar with it, you will notice in your code, in your challenges, in your daily coding, that this function can be used in many different ways, in many different types of lists. So, because this function is a bit tricky to explain in a single line or single video, I'll split this video into two parts, and we're gonna gradually build up to its, to explain it. In the first video, we will observe different examples, regular examples, and then we try to think about ways we can abstract certain things from given examples. And in the second video, we will actually write our own reduce function and then redefine those examples in terms of reduce. So let's start coding, and I'll write some examples. Okay. Let's say we have the list of tuples, pairs, it's just a regular array, and then we have sub arrays inside. And let's say we want to write the function where we turn this list into a map, into object, where the keys are this, first elements from sub arrays, and the values are the second elements. So let's start writing this function. And let's call this to object. We can name it whatever we want. And this function will receive the list, any list array. And in the end, we're going to have a result. It will be an object. And we're going to have to return this object. And now we have to turn given list into object, where the keys are the first elements from subarrays and the values are the second element. So let's write, very simple. And in these examples, we're not going to use Ramda.JS yet because we want to build everything ourselves so we can understand different things about reduce. So we're going to use a very, old school for loop, very standard one. And inside this loop, we're going to add elements in this result, and the keys are going to be list I0 and the value will be list I1. So the given element, the first item inside this subarray, and in the first given subarray this second element. So let's test this, Let's test this and call it to object list. Save this, run, and yes, we have actually got the result we wanted. This list is turned into the object. So it's really nice, and we can use this function with different types of lists, with different lists. So let's check this for another list. Now let's say we have the description of movie. Let's run this again, and again we've got this object here, and it is working fine. It's working as expected, and all is good. Now let's continue working on our examples. I'll comment this out. Let's remove this log and start writing another example. Now let's say we have the list of strings and we want to write our join function. So we can concatenate these items inside the list as a single string. Let's start writing this function. And we will have, now let's call this toString, a very simple name. And let's say we have there the list that we want to, take the items from and join. And let's say we have a separator, separator string between them. And let's write this function. So the final result that we're going to have is a string. So let's create this variable, initialize it with empty string, and in the end we will return this. Now we can repeat our loop, very standard for loop, and in the result we will just add this current item. And now if the given item is not the last, let's create another variable is not last, and it will be a Boolean value. If I is less than length minus 1, so it means it's not the last element. And then if it is not last, if this element isn't last, we will also want to add the separator. This separator here. Okay, we have this list, so we can test this already. Let's clear this. Let's write console log, and let's call this function for our list. And let's say the separator is an empty string. Oh, there's my mistake. We are reassigning value for a const variable. So let's define it with let. And yeah, the bug is fixed. There are no more errors, and we have taken our list. And we have in the end received our concatenated version, and it's just a simple string. So let's call this for a second function. But let's say we want to use the space as a separator. Let's run this again, and it is working as expected. And that's fine. Okay, let's create another example. So we have more examples to observe. And yeah, let's comment this out, remove this, and let's start writing another example. Now let's imagine we have a function which operates on a list of strings, and it will return the strings that are long strings, that are the size of the strings are more than certain number of characters. So let's write this. I'm sure you're already thinking the ways how to implement this with Ramda.JS and filter function, but we're gonna write this from scratch. So let's call this function long strings, and it will receive the list that we want to take strings from, and we want to receive another parameter, character number, and this will decide if string is long or not. So if the number of characters inside the string is more than this parameter, then we consider it as a long string. So in this case, in the end we're gonna return a list, a regular array. Let's call it result. We'll return this result. Let's write standard for loop, and inside the for loop we are actually going to check current element, and if its length is more than character number, after which the string is considered to be a long string, a large string. Let's write this, and if the string is long, if it's a long string, then we can push into the result our current element. Let's use our list here. Let's use this, and let's call this, let's test this function and call it with our list, which is right now man of steel, this list. And let's type in 0. It should return all the elements. And yes, it is returning all the elements because, well, every string inside has the length more than 0. Now let's type in 2, and as you see, it has removed off, and we only are left with man and steel. If we're gonna add the 3 there, we will only have this steel, so it is working fine. And if we are going to specify, let's say 6, we will receive the empty string, empty list. So it says that there are no long strings inside this. Now it's all good, and you might wonder why we needed these examples and why have we implemented these functions ourselves, and why have not we used Ramda.JS. Now this is a good question, but right now we have to observe these examples and to kind of see what are common characteristics about these functions. So we're gonna end this video here. I'm leaving you with these examples. I ask you to write this as I'm writing this, and let's think about this. Think about these functions, what they have in common, and what are the things that we can abstract away from those functions. So in the next video, we're going to do actually that. We're going to go through all of these three functions and see what they have in common and what things can we extract from them. And then we're going to write our own reduce function, and then we will redefine those functions in terms of reduce. So this is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you liked it, click the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends.